Next, we're going to talk about how we develop coordination on the drum set. The terms coordination and independence get mixed up a lot, but actually they really mean mostly the same thing. When we're thinking about independence, we're actually hearing an independent effect between coordinated limbs on the drum set that are aligned with one another. So, important terms: coordination and alignment. And we don't get too upset if we hear the word independence because we actually know what that means. It's really sort of an independent timbre, but not an independent time feel. So, how do we get started with this with a young player? One of the most common ways to do this is for the player to set out a timeline and in one hand, typically on the ride cymbal, and then take a figure, defined figure, and move it through the bar. So, for instance, we might start with a quarter note, and you'll see these depicted in some of the exercises. A quarter note, and then we move the quarter note, single note, by 1/8 note, and then another eighth note, and then another eighth note. So here's an example of that, starting with the timeline. We'll do it with the regular swing jazz timeline. And so on. Now, obviously, we can add a 2-note figure or a 3-note figure. I'll just try a 2-note figure. Now, what I'm attempting to do is to not only align the instruments in terms of when they hit, but also in terms of the sound. The alignment or the coordination is going to be impacted also by the distance between the surface between the stroke and the surface here, and the stroke and the surface here. And so, just like a flam, on a snare drum, we know that if we strike one stick higher than the other, we're going to produce an uneven set of strokes, and sometimes that's desirable if we want to produce a flam. If we want to play something in unison, we have to play unison strokes and unison heights. So that's really factored into a lot of what we do as we think about early stages of coordination and independence. We can add the bass drum, and oftentimes we do this if we're in a swing feel, very simply by adding a quarter note bass drum here and 2 and 4 on the hi-hat. So. Okay, so you noticed I started mixing up those sounds a little bit, which we'll talk about as we go along. So we can also, in this exercise, change the time feel. So an example of that might be to move to a straight eighth note ride beat or a straight eighth note timeline, as opposed to a swung timeline. This would be a timeline that we might hear in a Latin-oriented sort of a style. So. So we could also change the ostinato with the bass drum. So instead of just 4 on the bass drum, we could go. So that's really how we start working with alignment and coordination. One of the ways, one of the very common ways that teachers who work on this drum set will introduce coordination, alignment, and independence.